Hello. In this video, we are discussing the most important concepts and topics that can definitely be asked in the upcoming examination. And the unit that we're discussing today is Indian philosophy. So, you see, the first introductory lecture is dealing with the nature, meaning, scope, the schools, and the characteristics. Extremely important. You ought to be having a very thorough understanding of the first two lectures for that matter, because these two lectures are dealing with the entire different schools, 8, 9 schools that we are going to be discussing in a great detail in the coming lectures. So these two are going to set your premise right. For instance, what are the orthodox schools? What are the heterodox schools? What is the major difference between these two? What are the examples of these two? Is something that can be asked in the exam, has been asked in the exam also. So you can get a question on this definitely. Then moving on to the Charvaka school. This is the first school of Indian philosophy. Extremely important for the simple reason that this is a heterodox school of Indian philosophy, and it is also what? It is a materialist school of Indian philosophy. So you see, since Charvaka is the only materialist school of Indian philosophy, this becomes extremely important. And if you go through the exam papers, you'll find that at least 1 to 2 questions are definitely asked every year from the Charvaka philosophy. Be very certain with what pramanas Charvaka school believes in, what is the ethics portion about, what is the metaphysical portion about, and what is Charvaka saying about theory of knowledge. Extremely important school. I'm stressing a lot on this. You'll definitely get a question from here. Then moving on to Jainism. Jainism is also a heterodox school of Indian philosophy. You got to be very certain with the concepts of Nyavad, the metaphysics, and especially important is the ethics in religion. You see, Jainism's ethic and religion is so important that it has also influenced Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy. And if you know, Mahatma Gandhi is also a concept which is under the modern Indian thinkers. So you can definitely get a comparative analysis question on these two. Have a very thorough understanding of it. Then moving on to the school of Buddhism. You see, these schools that we're discussing right now, for instance, Charvak, for instance, Jainism, Buddhism, you definitely get a question in the exam from these schools. Now, when it comes to Buddhism, you got to be absolutely certain with the, what is the Four Noble Truth? What are the metaphysical questions over which Buddha was silent? Why was he silent? Then the theory of Pratitya Samutpadavada, then the Ashtanga Marga, the theory of momentariness. All of these are extremely important ones. The second aspect of Buddhism is the different schools of Buddhism. Now, you see, we have discussed in a great detail the different schools, for instance, Madhyamika, Yogacara, Swatantrika, Vaibhasika. You got to have a decent understanding of what the principles of these four schools are. The most important amongst them is the one by Nagarjuna and Ashwagosha, which is dealing with nihilism and Shunyavada. Very important concept. Please understand it very carefully. Then moving on to the next school of Indian philosophy, we have come to the Nyaya school. Now you see, Nyaya school is one such school. If you go through the question papers, you'll find that there is definitely a question on inference every year. There is a definite question on kyatis every year. So please revise your kyatis very well. Please remember the epistemology part of Nyaya, very important. The padarthas, understanding of perception, understanding of vyapti, for instance, Vyapti, terms and differences. This is a definite question. Please look at the last year examinations, is always asked. Then moving on, Hetva Bhasha. Hetva Bhasha is also again very important. The different kinds, that is Swabhachara, Bhadita, Viruddha, very important. Okay. You see, Nyaya is once a school where you have to understand the different pramanas that there are. For instance, we're dealing with perception, inference, we're dealing with comparison, we're dealing with verbal testimony. So you must understand what's the take on Nyaya on these different pramanas. Then moving on, this, if you see lecture number 44, this is talking about the theory of creation, that is Satkaryavada and Asatkaryavada. Now you need to be absolutely certain with the definition of these two. Which schools believe in Satkaryavada and which school believe in Asatkaryavada? This can also be asked. The next is the Vaibhasika school. Now, the most important bit pertaining to the Vaibhasika school is the understanding of Padarthas and the Dravyas. You need to be absolutely certain with the kind of Dravyas there are and its 9 kinds. Similarly, the Padarthas, Guna, Karma, Generality, all of these are extremely important. Please revise them. We have extensively discussed this in these lectures. Then moving on, we have the introduction to Sankhya and the theory of creation. You see, when we talk about the school of Sankhya, the most important bit in Sankhya school is that we're going to be talking about the theory of creation. And when we are talking about the theory of creation, two special concepts, for instance, the nature of Prakriti and the nature of Purusha, are very important. You get a question from these topics every year in the exam. You need to be absolutely certain with the nature of Prakriti and also the arguments for the existence of Prakriti. Similarly, the nature of Purusha and the arguments for the existence of Purusha. Very important concept. Moving on to the next school of yoga, that is the yoga school by this is the 62 lecture, that is the yoga school by Patanjali. Now in this lecture you need to be absolutely certain with the concept of Chitta Bhumi, the concept of Ashtanga yoga, and also these are the only bits that can be asked in the exam. One more important thing is that whatever schools that we are discussing at the moment, you need to be very certain with the founders of these schools, with the ones who are associated, the names that are associated with these schools, and also their important literature. You can get a question on the author, on the important literature's authors, the founders. This is a must question, comes in the exam every year. Then the next one that we have to discuss is uh, the concept of God in yoga is not as important. Like I told you, Ashtanga yoga and Chitta Bhumi is very important. Please revise them very carefully. Then moving on to the understanding of Brahma and Abrahma, you get a question on this also. You need to understand the definition of the two and how the two vary from one another. Then the understanding of Brahman and Atman. We have different Upanishads here, Mandukya, Brihadaranyaka, Chandogya. Please remember the specifics that are discussed in these Upanishads. The special terms that have been used in these Upanishads are very important. You can get this in the exam. Similarly, the concept of a cosmic Brahman in Kena Upanishad, the concept of Neti Neti and liberation, very important. The next question that could also be asked in, if you read this, it's actually given here, the understanding of perception as per Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta. There is a lot of, there's a lot of chance for this question to come in the exam because it was asked last to last year. And if you see questions have a way of, being repeated, so please revise this lecture very carefully. Then we move on to the next school. This is Mimamsa. Now, Mimamsa is divided into two schools, Purva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa. You need to revise the two very well. What's the basic differentiation between the two schools? How one believes in the theory of Karmakand and the other believes in the theory of Jnanakand. What is Karmakand? What is Jnanakand? All explained in these. Then you see the school of Purva Mimamsa is further divided into Prabhakara school and Kumarila school. Very important. You can definitely get a comparative analysis between these two schools following under the same category of Purva Mimamsa. So all of this is discussed here. Then we are moving to the other, that is Uttar Mimamsa, the school of Advaita Vedanta. Very important. Shankaracharya, please revise this very well. Then Shuddha Advaita school is the second school here. Then we have the Shankaracharya's understanding of Jiva, the Shankaracharya understanding of Maya, the Brahman, very important concepts. Then the philosophy of Madhavacharya, very important again. Nimbarka, Vallabha, and Chaitanya. You see, when I'm discussing these different schools under the Mimamsa category, you have to understand that one question from Shankara school is a definite given. The others questions are also going to be asked from this category. So please revise these different schools under the same category. Very important, okay? Then Shaivism and Vaishnavism. This is a new introduction, so there are high chances of the questions being asked on this concept. It's a very simple lecture. We have discussed the very basics of it. Please revise it very carefully. So you have up till the lecture 90 units and topics discussing the essence of Indian philosophy. We have discussed the important ones from the exam's point of view. The simple thing that you need to understand in the exam is that there are a few questions that are definitely going to be asked every year. Like we have discussed, it's about literature, the authors of the school, then what they believe in, the goal and the objectives, and also the special terms that are only associated with certain schools. So revise this accordingly, and I wish you all the best.